that if a person falls into sin, that he hides his sin. He doesn't advertise it, nor does he call to it, nor does he invite to it. He hides it, and the rest of the people hide it for him. That we don't try to expose others. Because Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man da'a ila hudan kana lahu min al-ajri mithlu ujuri man tabi'ahu." That the one who calls to guidance, then for him there is the reward of the one who follows him in the good guidance, meaning it follows him and follows that which he calls him to. Without the reward, لا ينقص ذلك من أجورهم شيئا, without any diminution or any lessening of the reward of the ones who follow him. So this means that if you call to good and if you call to that which is correct and that which is revelation and guidance and righteous deeds, then you get the reward same as the one who has taken your advice and taken your da'wah, without their reward diminishing in the least. وَمَنْ دَعَا إِلَى الضَّلَالَةٍ كَانَ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْإِثْمِ مِثْلُ آثِمِ مَنْ تَبِعَهُ. And the one who invites others to misguidance, then for him is the sin, same as the one who follows him in that misguidance. لا ينقص ذلك من آثامهم شيئا, without any lessening of the punishment of the one who has followed him in committing that sin. So this hadith that has been reported by Imam Muslim establishes for us the great sin of calling others to disobedience. So even though we say that the one who invites others to fornication or riba or music or movies or vice of any sort, alcohol and its drinking and gambling and so on, that yes, the one who indulges in that and engages in those types of activities is sinful. But let's say he just calls one person to commit the sin. Then now he carries the burden of two, himself and the one that he has invited to that sin. If he invites 3 people, then he carries the sin of 4, his own sin and the sin of the 3 that followed him. So imagine there's a person out there on social media, for example in our times, and he invites 100,000 to gamble, or 100,000 to drink alcohol, or 100,000 to fornicate. And you find Muslims that will actually do that. So every single one of those 100,000, let's say even if 40,000 of them follow him in the sin. So let's say he spreads some music online. So he has many followers and let's say 40,000 people listen to the music that he has sent out. So 40,000, he gets the sin of 40,000 plus 1. 1 himself and the 40,000 that listened. Same goes for pornography, same goes for drinking alcohol or gambling. And this is ongoing. This is ongoing, meaning even after his death. Why? Because whomsoever follows him in that sin, he will carry the burden of everyone who follows him thereafter, just like the killing of one of the children of Adam of the other. So the first one, the 2 children of Adam, the one who kills the other, then he carries the burden of every sin or everyone who followed him in that sin. So anyone who imitated him and followed him. So the one who calls to misguidance, whether it be bid'ah, whether it be fornication, whether it be stealing, whether it be gambling, watching movies, because that's shared. Like sometimes you find a person, he watches, something on Netflix or one of these movie channels. Now he wants all of his mates to follow it. So what's the quickest way? Let me just send it out on social media. So he tweets it out or he puts it on his Facebook. Oh, this was a fantastic movie or whatever. So 200 of his friends, they follow him. And then they share it onto others. So he carries the sin of all of those individuals, wal-iyadu billah, without their sin being diminished in the least. So their sin won't be decreased. And then it carries on. So someone invites you, and then he goes out and invites others. So he now takes on the mantle of calling others to misguidance. And this is why it's so important that if a person falls into sin, that he hides his sin. He doesn't advertise it, nor does he call to it, nor does he invite to it. He hides it, and the rest of the people hide it for him. That we don't try to expose others. We don't try to expose others. Because the exposition of a person who has sinned, there's a danger that others may imitate him or her. So if you drink, so let's say a person, he falls short, and for whatever reason, living in the societies that many of our youth are raised up in, it's possible, and you hear stories of shabab, Allahul Musta'an, youth, who smoke marijuana or weed or whatever, that they will smoke it or they'll take some of these drugs. And then they cry over it in the night because they've realized that they have committed sin. Actually, people have come to me in the past and they've said, last week, I don't know, Allahul Musta'an, Sheikh, that I ended up with some friends and we smoked some weed. And I felt so bad that I cried in the night. I said, well, that nadam itself is tawbah. So the fact that people fall into sin, and that's la bud, it's going to happen. People will fall into sin, and the societies, the more corrupt the society, then the more elevated the sin. In societies where even the smallest, like for example, in the time of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, and the Imam and the ruler, Muhammad bin Saud, a person, he would feel a great burden of sin upon his shoulders if he walked in the street musbil, trousers below his ankles. And that in their minds was something that was, embarrassing and sorrowful. Why? Because in a society, even though, of course, having a man having his garments below his ankles is a major sin. It's an act of sin and transgression, is fisq. But you look at societies today, that's the least of what they worry about. Even amongst certain Salafi families, they don't worry about their children walking around musbit. Why? Because the burden of sin in the societies that we live in, or what is considered to be sinful, is things that are in their minds even worse than that, like fornication and drinking and marijuana. Because in these types of societies, because the sins are so extreme, whether it be sodomy and homosexuality, or visiting prostitutes and escorts and so on, that those are considered to be like the big things. So if a youth is shaving off his beard, or walking around with qazi' or trousers below his ankles, it's not seen as anything. Because they think, oh, well, those are the real sins. These are like nothing. It's almost like makruh, or even, it's just an issue of adab. It's just an issue of manners and etiquette. So the closer a society or a community even, or a family for that matter, because the family itself becomes a fortress. So if you are in a strong, established, functional, not dysfunctional, a functioning family upon the Kitab and the Sunnah, then the family unit itself becomes a protection, or one of the wasa'il, or one of the means of protection that Allah has provided for a child. So, for example, if the eldest children are strong upon the deen, strong upon the Sunnah, strong upon Salafiyah, strong upon morals and manners, they're chaste, so they don't indulge in lewdness and fawahish and these types of things. Then, as the rest of the children are born into the family, so they're the early ones, so the rest of the children, they follow suit. So they have to meet a standard. And likewise with parents, if the parents are good, then the children feel as though they need to meet a standard, and they feel embarrassed because they're not raised with television and music and gaming all day and night. They're just sitting gaming all day and night. They're not raised like that. They're raised actually to be upright, righteous, pious, followers of the sunnah of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when they see sin, they find it abhorrent. But let's say the parents are negligent, that there's music playing in the house and, they're sitting together and they're watching movies and, soaps or whatever else that they're watching. And the mother isn't really too concerned about how she dresses, and she walks out the house with makeup and perfume and so on. So now you've lowered the bar. So now the children will engage in that because mum and dad engage in these types of activities. So the bar is lowered. So when they go out into the community, then these things aren't seen as something strange. Why? Because we see it in the house every day. So when we go into the street and see it, then we see that every day. So then, how do you go lower than that? So they see those as normal. So lesser than that is a sin. So therefore, the family structure itself must be strong enough and firm enough and a fortress enough to raise themselves and their children and cultivate the whole household upon certain norms of behavior and conduct and deen. Certain things will not take place in this house, for example. So this is known for all of the children. So it begins with the first child and then it carries through to the rest of the children. Because the problem is, if the first child or the eldest is corrupt, then the rest of them will look up to that one. Because now he's the one who challenged. Let's say mom and dad are good, but he's the one who challenged mom and dad. So therefore, the rest of them will think it's okay to challenge mom and dad. So these are all challenges that you face in these types of societies. And they are challenges actually that we need to overcome and we need to face head on. Because if we don't, then the alternative is that, you lose your children to all of these types of corruptions in the world out there. So it's important that you are not yourself the source and the origin of the misguidance of others, whether it be your children, whether it be your wife. You hear sometimes that a sister said, all my life I was raised as a Salafi, I married this man, and he introduced me to music and movies. But all my life, my father and mother, we never did that. My husband introduced me to that. So then when the children are born, the children are introduced to the same thing. So be careful and be wary of not being the cause of the misguidance of others. It's bad enough that you sin yourself. But being the cause of the misguidance of others is just an extra burden that you don't really want to have to carry on Yawm al-Qiyamah.